Dorian Blake, a brilliant but eccentric book hunter and self-confessed bibliomaniac, heads the small firm Blake Associates Literary Investigations in San Francisco. From their loft-style office on Clementina Street, Dorian and his teammates track missing manuscripts, authenticate dubious discoveries, and navigate a shadow world of collectors, auction sharks, and occult bibliophiles. Each case is a mystery whose solution hinges on deep book lore, forensic bibliography, and treacherous human motives. Episode 5. Ghost Margin. Whispered along Charlotte Street, the drizzle formed a thin, persistent cadence, sliding off fractured slate and worm-eaten gutters, hissing whenever it met the pale warmth that leaked through mishung sash windows. Lambent puddles quivered like cheap mercury under the glow of a street lamp that had not been properly serviced since, so locals claimed, the coronation. In a cramped attic flat, whose eaves bent so low a tall visitor felt the roof scrape his overcoat collar, Adrian Hollis lay sprawled among a fan of priceless incunabula, a tragic coda to a life spent chasing the next magnificent footnote. The crystal drops of an antiquated chandelier, each bead still blackened by blitz soot, shivered from the force that had pitched him face down on the warped pine. Hollis's tortoiseshell lorgnette, that useless yet beloved ornament he polished with the care others reserve for heirloom rings, had snapped cleanly in half, two crescents curving away from his motionless chest like punctuation marks bracketing a last unsaid thought. His slack hand still pointed at the wall, where a half-finished note in scarlet pencil asked, "What if a book could choose its reader?" No blade pierced the flesh, yet at the hollow of his throat a scorched ring glowed faintly, the perfect imprint of a wedding band heated beyond tempering. Rain pushed through a cracked pane and teased an onion skin slip pinned to Hollis's waistcoat. Faint letters assembled on its surface in a colour too timid to claim hue. "You will join the marginal choir before sunrise. The margin speaks true." As constables hammered the swollen doorframe downstairs, the writing shimmered once, then bled invisibly into the fibres, leaving nothing for the arriving forensics team but the ghost of a threat and a room that smelled faintly of pepper, ozone, and binding glue. The drizzle thickened, drumming on chimney pots like a rehearsal for some funereal march. Whoever had authored those vanishing words slipped through the night with the precise rhythm of an umbrella tip tapping the cobbles, one measured beat after another, while a copper glow stuttered against low cloud cover and police radios squawked for backup. Across the Pacific, across an ocean and 8 time zones, dawn was only beginning to comb pale claws through the San Francisco fog that clung to Pier 24. Diesel breath from container winches mingled with the iron tang of tidal rot, and gulls circled like scraps of arguing paper on the wind. A DHL courier, cheeks flushed from an anxious sprint across slick planks, thrust a padded tube into Dorian Blake's hands. The man managed one strangled syllable of Blake's name before doubling over. Dorian's stylus squeaked across the battered signature tablet. The courier vanished back into mist, and the harbour's foghorn boomed its indifferent farewell. Blake unspooled crimson twine, revealing a half-vellum, half-scarlet octavo whose spine cracked beneath his cautious thumbs. Spectres at the Gutenberg table, an inquiry into printing and the beyond. London, 1864, privately published, known to exist in only 4 copies. The edges were foxed, the boards peeled, the kind of fragile thing librarians encase in mylar sarcophagi, but its presence seemed almost to warm the chilled morning air. Then, even before he could savour the paper's bruised vanilla scent, a sentence puffed into existence along the inner gutter as though breathed onto glass in a frigid room. Dorian Blake, keep the 31st of March clear. Ink remembers. A coil of unease stiffened along Blake's spine. His watch insisted today was the 30th. Blake and Associates. By noon, fog had climbed through the clerestory windows of Blake and Associates, winding among gantries and suspended ductwork like ghosts auditioning for corporeal form. Inside that high-roofed loft overlooking the Embarcadero, laser spectrographs hummed beside battered microfilm readers, and half the work tables were crowded with rare books, either bleeding away their secrets or stubbornly withholding them. Blake laid the Victorian volume atop a broad slab of maple, flanked by nitrile-gloved Meera Patel and Leo Jang, who maneuvered cameras and spectrofluorometers over the brittle pages. "Phenolphthalein," Meera murmured, thumb dancing across her handheld meter. "Victorian seance reagent. Physics says it can't appear without an alkaline trigger, but the ambient fog here is acidic." She shrugged into the white glare of the halogen lamps. "Yet, plainly, it does." Leo angled his DSLR for a raking shot. The letters render from nothing to fully opaque without any ultraviolet prompt. They skip the middle frames, as though the universe edits its own footage. From the mezzanine, Clara Reyes lowered her binoculars. "Someone engineered Hollis's death to synchronize with this delivery," she said. "We should assume they've penciled in whatever happens tomorrow, too." An encrypted ringtone cut across her words. "Professor Giles Harrow, Cambridge," announced the caller ID, though the feed sputtered like a candle in draught. "Dorian," Harrow's clipped voice pleaded. "Adrian Hollis is dead. Same thermal brand at his throat you showed me in the Bodleian poisoning case, same ink recipe in the note. I fear I'm next. They're using the margins as prophecy." Crackling static devoured the rest, leaving a frozen video frame in which smoke coiled behind Harrow like frightened letters. Hollis had once outbid Blake at a Sotheby's sale for a 15th century herbal, only to forward the treasure to him with the margin dedication books belong first to those who love them hardest. Now Blake flattened his palm atop the photograph of Hollis's ruined flat and vowed he would not let the margins dictate another obituary. Shadows in the Bodleian. 6 hours later, a red-eye flight ploughed through Heathrow rain. Blake, Clara, Meera, and Leo disembarked with carry-ons that clinked more like chemistry sets than luggage. Oxford greeted them at dawn with bicycle bells, wet cobblestones, and the sweet ache of chapel choirs rehearsing. Their taxi swerved past Radcliffe Camera and stopped before a Greco-Gothic facade that smelled of damp parchment and something darker. Elodie Travers awaited in a Jacobean-panelled anteroom of Magdalen College's archives, her storm-glass eyes huge above a denim jacket half concealed beneath archivist whites. She did not extend her hand. Instead, she gestured at the pine crate between her boot tips, stenciled, "Estate of Lord Quentin March, deceased." The wood still reeked of Atlantic brine. Meera's volatile compound sniffer went wild, arsenic off every chart. Clara raised a crowbar. "Time's a luxury. Hazmat suits aren't," she quipped, and prized off the lid. Victorian illustrated police news pages, yellow and brittle, cradled 5 calfskin notebooks. The uppermost lay partly open, and as air swept over the flyleaf, pewter-coloured letters began to bloom like hoarfrost. Elodie Travers. Your breath falters at noon. Leo's watch announced 11:48. Panic corralled into procedure. Dorian interrogated Elodie while Meera clipped a pulse oximeter to her finger and kept a salbutamol inhaler within immediate reach. The courier who delivered the crate, Elodie said, had claimed authority from Nigel Qualls, heir to the late Lord March. His forgery of Professor Harrow's signature was beyond perfect, indeed unnervingly confident. At 11:57, a fresh line of sulphurous script coalesced on a blank sheet a half-meter distant. Your science is missed. The margin commands the breath. Wall clocks ticked like heartbeats. Meera's aerosol neutralizer hissed pale clouds. Elodie's lips tightened around the inhaler's nozzle. Noon bells tolled in the Tom Tower overhead. The archivist drew a shallow but present breath, and the crawling ink retreated as though scorned. Hollis's early obsessions. While Mira stabilized Elodie, Clara rummaged through Hollis's personal correspondence the archivist had withheld until now. Parchment the hue of old teeth, margins choked with crabbed annotations. A biography surfaced between the sheets. Adrian Hollis, aged 9, disassembled his mother's family Bible to understand why the Apocrypha hid between printed leaves. Aged 12, he bribed a printer to let him watch the linotype machine spit each slug of hot metal. Aged 15, he apprenticed at Bernard Quaritch and learned that every worn spine was a siren calling irresistible sailors. The biography's epilogue narrated a boy who believed books were living organs misplaced in time. Ink dries, Hollis had once written to Harrow, only when the story consents to die. Dorian pocketed the pages, suspecting that somewhere among Hollis's myths lay a clue to disarming the alive and lethal text now stalking them. Hyperspectral revelations. Under invisible wavelengths, the notebooks pulsed with overlapping glyphs, dingbat clusters repeated in triptych, a quill, an hourglass, an ouroboros. Dorian recognized fragments of Tironian notes, a shorthand medieval scribes used to nest secrets between letters. Hollis had apparently discovered a trinity of ghost margins, 3 Victorian treatises whose annotations refused to remain inert, and someone was intent on exploiting them. Professor Harrow himself emerged from a hidden alcove, hair disheveled, tweed waistcoat inadvertently inside out. Adrian entrusted me with the 3rd volume, he confessed, voice shaking. He mailed one to a Swiss collector, prepared another for an auction tonight, but intended the last for my eyes alone. Someone intercepted everything and swapped in these poison-laced decoys. Clara ticked off the villain's business model. Intercept, terrorize, auction the haunted originals to billionaires hungry for occult bragging rights. Only these decoys carried polymer microcapsules of arsenic triggered by a humble RFID ping, the same frequency as any contactless credit card. A bystander could orchestrate murder with a wave of their wallet. Shipping logs supplied a name, Dieter Schrag, courier of dubious repute, last recorded en route to Geneva. Blake and Clara booked the first flight. Mira and Leo remained in London to shield Harrow and Elodie inside a negative-pressure NHS biolab. The Geneva Gambit. Night settled over Lake Geneva like silk sprinkled with coal dust. In the glass-walled headquarters of Cloth and Rouser Appraisals, Helena Cloth paced beneath track lights that carved daggers from her bobbed silhouette. Security footage proved Hollis's parcel had entered her building, but left again in Schrag's hands. His phone last pinged at a lakeside chateau belonging to Dr. Rowena March Qualls, Lord March's great-grandniece and co-executor of the estate. During the taxi ride, Clara read a dossier compiled by Swiss private investigators. Rowena held doctorates in chemistry and semiotics, chaired a think tank on narrative materiality, and had once patented an ink that changed color in response to ambient sound frequencies. Evidently, she had grown impatient with theoretical laurels. The chateau glittered that same evening. Chandeliers scattered fractured light onto the roulette wheel nerves of tycoons and pop stars who clutched first-edition Nicholas Nickleby copies like prayer books. Nigel Qualls welcomed them with oily aplomb. The margin is an oracle. This house, its temple. Bid bravely. Dorian stepped from the periphery, voice cool as glacier melt. Swiss heritage law prohibits the unsealed display of arsenic-laden artifacts. You're trafficking poison. Rowena drifted forward, smile as thin and sharp as a scalpel. Ideas, Mr. Blake, not poison, she corrected. Ink is but a messenger. Nigel produced Hollis's treatise. A sleek transmitter embedded in a fountain pen clicked once. The margin ignited. Lord Amrani, ultima vocat hora. A shipping magnate from Doha blanched. Bidding erupted like gunfire. Blake slid a blank RF shielded card beside the treatise. Let the oracle name its next victim, he invited. Nigel obliged. The pen clicked again. Yet instead of a name, the margin disgorged a string of GPS coordinates. Coordinates Leo, monitoring remotely, recognized at once. the NHS Biolab. In that same instant, a high-gain RFID cannon stitched a green laser through the chateau's skylights. Coordinates morphed into a countdown: 4500, 4459, 4458. Rowena's composure shattered. She had not programmed this. Guests bolted for the exits as police sirens wailed along the lakeshore. Back in London, Mira's voice crackled over the secure channel. A 100-watt blast on our frequency will rupture every capsule. Instant arsenic aerosol. Harrow let out a ragged breath. 142 irreplaceable manuscripts lay on shelves only a few meters from their temporary bunker. Leo triangulated the hostile signal. Hampstead Heath Observatory, abandoned since 1919. The observatory siege. Clara commandeered Metropolitan Police motorcycles. She and Blake tore through pre-dawn streets, leaving Swiss authorities to cuff Nigel and Rowena. The flight into Heathrow was a blur. Turbulence rattled teacups, and somewhere over the channel, a new line rippled across spectres despite Faraday shielding. Ink meets star glass, Blake. Bring the book or share the choir's breath. Hampstead Heath after midnight smelled of wet nettles and fox musk. The observatory dome crouched like a rusted skull above tangled bramble, its copper plating freckled with verdigris. Inside, impulsive arcs of bluish electricity leapt between Tesla coils, arranged in a ritualistic hexagon. Dieter Schrag hunched over a console of scavenged transceivers. Rowena, sprung on bail too swiftly, stood amid the maelstrom, mania alight in her gaze. Victorian spiritualists were scorned, she declaimed, voice echoing off curved iron ribs. My great-uncle died ridiculed. Tonight we inherit his vindication. At 7 GMT every living seance volume shall awaken. Ink will speak. Arsenic will baptize unbelievers. Around the brass orrery, notebooks connected to scarlet ink vats quivered like organs awaiting circulation. Blake held spectres up to the sputtering arc light. If prophecy is real, he challenged, let this volume judge who deserves fate. Rowena's transmitter clicked. Ink tore across vellum. Rowena march. Ink binds oath. Oath binds fate. The letters blackened, combusted, left a scorched halo. Rowena reeled. An orrery arm snagged her ankle. Schrag cursed, bolting for the exit, but Clara's taser found its mark. Leo's broadband square-wave static snarled through the ether. Mira, miles away, flooded the biolab with neutralizing aerosol. Arsenic crystals fell like grey snow inside the observatory, robbed of venom. Rowena coughed, fury dissolving into something perilously close to fear. Metropolitan Police sealed the séance notebooks in lead-lined crates. Nigel, interrogated in Geneva, sang arias of confession, micro-capsule research, offshore crypto wallets, promises of living books to the world's wealthiest collectors. Yet one mystery lingered. The hijack signal that had overwritten Rowena's coordinates emanated from a tidal island off Cornwall, once the isolated refuge of typographer-alchemist William Lear, dead since 1890. Even Leo's most ruthless signal forensics could not explain that. The Lear Island Interlude. 3 days later, Blake, Clara, Mira, and Leo chartered a weather-beaten trawler from St. Ives to Lear Island, a granite nub visible only at low tide, crowned by a derelict lighthouse and a collapsing cottage. Legend claimed Lear attempted to print an edition of Revelation using ink infused with his own blood, but the press exploded during proofing, killing 2 apprentices. They lashed the trawler to rusted mooring rings. Wind keened through broken shutters like a choir that had forgotten its Latin. Inside the cottage, a treadle press lay upended among drifts of kelp and bird bones. But the lighthouse revealed fresher secrets: a cobweb of fiber-optic cables, a fuel cell the size of a coffin, and a dish antenna aimed unerringly at Hampstead Heath. Mira's multimeter chirped. Same RF signature that hit us. Recorded on a loop, she said. Someone pirated Lear's ghost reputation to hijack the notebooks and frame Rowena as a loose cannon. As they descended the spiral stair, a device taped to the balustrade blinked angry red. Clara froze. Mercury tilt switch, homemade plastique, enough to crater the tower. Leo's drone, left idling on the beach, fed them thermal imagery. No heat signatures, but a line of boot prints in the sand meandered from the rocks to their trawler's hull. Whoever set the trap had slipped past them. Blake severed the wires with a ceramic blade. The timer halted at 0013. He pocketed the unexploded assembly. Evidence demanded context, and context, he suspected, would point to a shadow broker with deeper pockets than the Qualls estate. The broker of blank pages. Back in London, Interpol chatter finally aligned with a rumour Mira had chased for months. An anonymous dealer known only as Penumbra was collecting responsive texts, manuscripts whose ink could be coaxed into predictive or coercive behaviour. Penumbra's calling card, a square of vellum embossed with a single raised dot, no larger than a pinhead, yet always placed dead centre with machine shop precision. One such dot now sat on Blake's desk, delivered inside the wrong-addressed envelope that had turned up in his morning mail. Under side lighting, it glimmered with iridescence, as though layers of microprinting hid within the dimple. Clara scanned it at 8000 dpi. The resulting bitmap revealed fractal lattices spelling, in Tironian shorthand, the phrase, "Expect the blank to fight back." Interpol kicked up a partial. Penumbra frequented rare book conventions under false names, purchased damaged incunabula, and resold them weeks later, reactivated. One convention, Codex Con Berlin, opened in 48 hours. Blake secured press credentials under the guise of a podcast host, Margins and Miracles, and booked 4 tickets. Harrow and Elodie, still recuperating, promised remote support. Berlin, Carnival of Collectors. CodexCon occupied a Bauhaus-era exhibition hall whose steel arches echoed with the expectant hush of collectors hunting unicorns. Artificial skylights bathed vitrines in neutral lux, preserving inks older than the Edison bulb. Between booths of gilt-tooled calf and zodiacal foredges, rumours ran like mercury. A clandestine auction, invitation only, featuring a self-editing folio and a palimpsest that bleeds back. Dorian's badge granted access to a VIP mezzanine where champagne flowed and luthiers played madrigals on restored Stradivari. Mira sidled between venture capitalists wearing gloves worth more than some first folios. Leo hacked the security feed, searching for any attendee whose lanyard barcode pinged an alias cross-referenced to Penumbra's purchase history. At 1906, a man in a silver Nehru coat left a leather case unattended by the mezzanine balustrade. Its clasp bore the pinhead dot. Blake tailed him through emergency exit corridors that reeked of mothballs and fresh paint, down 2 flights to an Undercroft service tunnel. There, the man removed a latex mask. The Nehru coat's shoulders suddenly too broad, the gait subtly different. Cameras caught nothing. Leo's feed stuttered under a deliberate jamming pulse. Clara, lurking in the next alcove, caught a whispered phrase. Caligo's reserve is on schedule. Caligo, Latin for fog. Blake's recurring element. Penumbra, perhaps, hid not just behind rare books, but behind the very meteorology of memory. The auction of vanishing lots. Deep in the Undercroft, a temporary salon bristled with gunmetal scanners and tabletop Van de Graaff generators designed to make parchment quiver theatrically. A circle of armchairs surrounded a single lectern draped in black silk. 20 bidders presented biometric tokens. Blake recognized shipping magnate Lord Amrani, alive, if shaken, as well as a Russian crypto baroness whose portfolio included 3 private think tanks and a weather modification startup. Lot 1, a quarto whose text erased itself whenever the reader's heart rate fell below 60 beats per minute. Lot 2, a broadsheet that swapped its headlines to match the dreams of the nearest sleeper. Bids soared into the millions. Lot 3 emerged, a brushed steel attaché. The auctioneer produced Blake's own volume, Spectres at the Gutenberg Table, stolen from the vault despite triple Faraday cages. Panic flickered behind Blake's composure, but external calm remained. He lifted 2 fingers, signaling Leo. The auctioneer tapped the attaché. Spectres lay inert. "Reserve price," announced the gavel. Silence. The Baroness lifted her paddle. Before the bid could register, the page edges of Spectres ignited. Not with flame, but with light, ultra-cold phosphorescence outlining each leaf. The room darkened as though the brightness hoarded all luminance. Letters sprayed upward, swirling like soot. The blank owns the tongue that names it. A gust of grave cold air swept through the salon. The bidders recoiled. Blake seized the volume, slammed it shut, and shouted to the stunned crowd, "Forgery! A stunt. Real living texts do not combust, they command." Panic did what reason could not. The salon emptied in 30 seconds. Only one figure remained, the Nehru coatman, mask discarded, revealing a face too symmetrical, too averaged, a surgeon's idea of anonymity. He set a coin on the lectern, a bronze Hypatia drachma, identical to Blake's talisman. "We are both custodians," he said, "but your custodianship is parochial, mine is planetary." "Penumbra?" The man nodded fractionally. "The world's margins grow every day, Mr. Blake. Someone must curate the liminal texts before amateurs transmute them into weapons." He gestured at the sealed attaché, still glowing at the seams. "You protected one volume. I propose alliance, not opposition. Join me." Blake recalled Hollis's charred throat, Elodie's near suffocation, Rowena's arsenic vision. "Your methods leave corpses." Penumbra's sigh was almost paternal. Collateral annotation. He pressed a remote. Somewhere overhead, alarms wailed. The exhibition hall evacuated. Sprinklers doused priceless vellum in chlorinated drizzle. When the smoke glass shutters finally descended, Penumbra was gone, leaving only the drachma and a line handwritten on the coin's edge in near microscopic script. Not every blank desires silence. Epilogues and open margins. Harrow, patched in via HoloLink, exhaled as Blake secured Spectres inside a new vault, steel-tempered, copper-meshed, and nested within a signal-scrambling Faraday labyrinth 4 layers deep. "Some inks never dry, Dorian," he muttered over the crackle. "They wait for the right humidity of fear." Mira, studying residual shimmer beneath red safe light, whispered, "Perhaps the chemistry is but costume, and something far older wears it." Clara locked clasps the size of locomotive couplers, while Leo tweaked the spectrum jammer. The loft's air hummed with invisible artillery. Fog pressed its damp palms against the windows like a patient supplicant. Blake poured 4 mugs of Assam, steam curling like ectoplasm. Silence, rich and quivering, reigned, until a line appeared upon the page he had cauterized to sterility, faint as chalk dust in a long-abandoned schoolhouse. Guard the blank. Silence is also print. Blake slipped the book into its cradle, pocketed the Hypatia drachma, his double reminder of hubris and hidden allies, and ascended the narrow iron stair to the catwalk. Below, the volumes of past and pending adventures rustled softly, as though some phantom page-turner considered the table of contents. Somewhere between foghorn blasts, another margin awaited, spotless, patient, ready to speak, and Blake knew the only truly safe blank page was the one a vigilant eye never left unwatched.